He threw her out, pregnant, alone. The family that had welcomed her now treated her like garbage. The town that had admired her now crossed the street to avoid her. For 6 months, she slept in stables, begged for scraps, endured humiliation no woman should face. She fought to survive, for her baby, for herself, to prove that everyone who'd abandoned her was wrong. What she didn't know, someone was watching, someone who remembered her from a lifetime ago. They'd taken everything from her. Now they would pay, every single one of them, for every tear she cried, for every night she shivered in that stable, for every moment they made her feel worthless. But first he had to... Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? And have you ever had to rise from rock bottom? New Mexico Territory, 1875. Sarah had learned early that beauty was currency. At 23, she'd converted that currency into security, a marriage to Richard Cartwright, owner of the largest trading post and cattle operation in 3 counties. It wasn't a love match. Richard was 15 years older, stern, focused on business, but he was respected, wealthy, and he'd chosen her. For 2 years, Sarah played her role perfectly. The dutiful wife, the gracious hostess, the woman who made Richard look good at every town function. She managed his house, entertained his business partners, smiled until her face hurt. It was lonely, but it was safe. Then she got pregnant, and everything collapsed. "I don't want a child," Richard said flatly when she told him, her hands shaking with nervous excitement. "I never did. I thought you understood that." Sarah's smile froze. "But we're married. A family is..." "I didn't marry you to start a family. I married you because you were beautiful and young and made me look successful." Richard's voice was cold, clinical. "But you're not as young as you were. And frankly, Sarah, you've become tiresome." The words hit like slaps. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying there's someone else. Rebecca Turner, the sheriff's daughter. She's 19, lovely, and she doesn't come with complications." Richard pulled out papers from his desk. "I've had divorce papers drawn up. You'll leave today, take your personal things, nothing else." Sarah couldn't breathe. "Richard, I'm carrying your child. That's your problem, not mine." Richard's eyes were empty of anything resembling compassion. "My family built this town. No one will side with you. Leave quietly or I'll have you forcibly removed." "Where am I supposed to go?" "I honestly don't care." Richard turned back to his ledgers, dismissing her like a servant. "Just be gone by nightfall." Sarah stood there frozen, her world imploding. She'd given this man 2 years. She'd been exactly what he wanted. And now, because she'd committed the crime of getting pregnant, she was trash to be discarded. She packed one bag with trembling hands. Clothes, her mother's Bible, the few pieces of jewelry that had been hers before marriage. As she walked out of the house she'd called home, Richard didn't even look up. She went to her parents' farm, 5 miles outside town. Surely they would help. Surely blood was thicker than Richard's influence. She was wrong. Her father stood on the porch, blocking the door. "We heard what happened. Richard's family already came by." "Papa, please, I'm pregnant. You need to accept the consequences of your actions," her father said harshly. "Richard is the most powerful man in this county. His family has made it clear. Anyone who helps you will face economic ruin. I have 3 other children to think about. I can't risk everything for your mistakes." "My mistakes?" Sarah's voice cracked. "I got pregnant by my husband. That's not a mistake, You couldn't keep him happy. That's your failure, not his." Her mother appeared behind her father, face hard. "We can't help you. It would destroy this family." They closed the door, left her standing there, pregnant and homeless, on the property where she'd grown up. Sarah didn't move for a long time. She stood there staring at that closed door, listening to the sounds inside. Her younger sister practicing piano, her brothers arguing about chores. The normal sounds of a family that no longer included her. She remembered being 8 years old, falling from a tree and breaking her arm. Her father had carried her all the way to town, running despite his bad leg. Her mother had held her hand through the pain, singing softly. She remembered her mother teaching her to bake, flour dusting their noses as they laughed, her father showing her the constellations, saying she was smart enough to learn anything. That love hadn't been fake. It had been real, but apparently it had conditions she'd never known about. Be acceptable, be convenient, don't cost us anything. Sarah placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby move. "I will never do this to you," she whispered. "Whatever happens, wherever we end up, I will never close a door in your face. I will never choose safety over you. Never." The baby kicked, as if in response. Sarah picked up her bag and walked away from her childhood home. She didn't look back. There was nothing behind her but betrayal. Sarah wandered to town in a daze. Surely someone would help. Mrs. Henderson, who'd praised her pie at the church social. Mr. Yang, whose son she'd tutored. The pastor who'd married her and Richard. But Richard's family had been thorough. Everywhere Sarah went, doors closed. People she'd considered friends crossed the street to avoid her. The pastor told her she was being tested by God and should pray for guidance, but offered no actual help. By nightfall, Sarah had nowhere to go. She found herself at the stable behind the general store. The owner, old Mr. Pike, took pity enough to let her sleep in the hay, as long as she was gone before customers arrived. That first night, curled in horse-scented straw, feeling her baby move inside her, Sarah understood. She'd fallen as far as a person could fall. From respected wife to homeless beggar in a single day, and she was 4 months pregnant, with 5 more months to survive before the baby came. She cried until there were no tears left. Then she made a choice. She would survive somehow. She'd endure every humiliation, every hardship, every cruelty, for her baby, for herself, to prove that Richard and everyone who'd abandoned her were wrong. She just had no idea how. The next 6 months were a study in degradation. Sarah learned that pregnancy made everything harder. Her body swelled. Her back ached constantly. Simple tasks became monumental challenges, and the world showed no mercy. She worked when she could find it, washing clothes in the river for pennies, scrubbing floors in houses where women who'd once been her peers now looked through her like she was invisible, hauling water, mending fences, any job too dirty or difficult for anyone else to want. The money barely covered food. She ate whatever scraps she could afford, stale bread, bruised vegetables, sometimes nothing at all. She told herself the baby would be fine, that her body would protect it even as she wasted away. But she felt weak constantly, dizzy, her body cannibalizing itself to feed the life inside her. She slept in the stable most nights, though sometimes Mr. Pike would turn her away if important customers were coming. Those nights she slept outside, under whatever shelter she could find. In summer, it was tolerable. As fall approached and temperatures dropped, it became dangerous. The cruelty was constant. Children threw rocks at her, calling her names their parents taught them. Women would step aside, pulling their skirts away, as if poverty were contagious. Men would proposition her with ugly offers, as if being pregnant and desperate meant she had no right to dignity. Richard's new wife, Rebecca, the 19-year-old sheriff's daughter, would parade through town in expensive dresses, hanging on Richard's arm. Once they rode past Sarah as she scrubbed the boardwalk in front of the dry goods store. Rebecca had laughed, a high tinkling sound, and said something to Richard that made him smile. They didn't even acknowledge Sarah's existence. But the worst part wasn't the physical hardship or the social humiliation. It was the hopelessness. Sarah was 7 months pregnant now, her belly huge, her body failing. What would happen when the baby came? How would she care for an infant with no money, no shelter, no support? The thoughts kept her awake at night, terror mixing with exhaustion. One afternoon in late September, Sarah was washing laundry in the river when she saw a young mother playing with her toddler on the bank. The woman was laughing, spinning the child in circles, while the little boy shrieked with delight. Sarah's hands stilled in the cold water, watching them. That should be her in a few months. Playing with her baby, teaching them to walk, hearing their laugh. But how? Where would they even sleep? How would she keep a newborn warm when she couldn't even keep herself fed? The young mother noticed Sarah staring. Her smile faded. She gathered her son quickly and left, as if Sarah's misfortune might contaminate them. The little boy looked back, confused, still wanting to play. Sarah returned to scrubbing clothes, but her hands were shaking. She was so tired. Tired of being hungry, tired of being cold, tired of being hated for existing. The baby kicked hard, as if protesting the anxiety flooding through her. "I know," Sarah whispered to her belly. "I know you're scared. I am too. But we're going to make it. Somehow. I promise you, I will not let you die in a stable. I will not let them win." It was a promise she had no idea how to keep, but she made it anyway, because giving up wasn't an option, not while her baby needed her to fight. One evening in late September, Sarah was hauling water from the well to the stable. Mr. Pike let her stay for free if she did work when she stumbled. The bucket fell, water splashing everywhere. Sarah caught herself on the fence, gasping, her back screaming in pain. "You all right?" a voice asked. Sarah looked up to see Mr. Yang, the Chinese merchant, watching her with concern. He'd been one of the few who hadn't outright refused to acknowledge her existence, though he'd never offered help either. "I'm fine," Sarah lied, straightening with difficulty. Mr. Yang studied her swollen belly, her gaunt face, her trembling hands. "You're not fine, you're dying." He said it matter-of-factly, without cruelty. "Another month like this, maybe you survive. The baby probably doesn't." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I don't have choices. No one will help me. I do what I can." "I know." Mr. Yang was quiet for a moment. "My wife and I, we remember what you did 3 years ago. You tutored our son when the teacher refused to teach Chinese children. You did it for free, even though your husband told you not to." Sarah had forgotten that. It seemed like another lifetime. "We can't help you openly," Mr. Yang continued. "The Cartwrights would destroy us, but—" He gestured to a small package by the well. "Sometimes I leave food I can't sell, bread that's a day old, vegetables that are bruised. If someone were to take them before I throw them away, I wouldn't notice." Fresh tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. It wasn't much, but it was something. "Thank you." Mr. Yang nodded once and left. From that day forward, there were regular discarded packages by the well, always when no one was looking, always just enough to keep Sarah and her baby alive one more day. It was a tiny kindness in an ocean of cruelty, but it mattered. It meant someone remembered she was human, that she deserved to survive. Sarah didn't know she was being watched, but she was. For 2 months, a man had been observing the town, watching, listening, learning. His name was Kuruk, and he had a debt to repay. 6 years earlier, Kuruk had been 18. Young, reckless, trying to prove himself to his Apache band. He'd been tracking antelope near white settlements when soldiers spotted him. They'd chased him for miles, shot him in the leg, left him bleeding out in a ravine, assuming he'd die. He would have. But Sarah found him. She'd been out gathering herbs, newly married to Richard, trying to be useful. She'd stumbled across Kuruk, barely conscious, blood pooling beneath him. Any sane person would have run, gotten soldiers. Apache were feared in that territory. Helping one could get you killed. Sarah had looked at him, this young man dying alone, and seen a person. She'd torn her petticoat for bandages, used her herb knowledge to pack the wound, given him her water, stayed with him until he could move. Then she'd helped him onto her horse, pointed him toward Apache territory and said, "Go before they find you." Kuruk had stared at her, this white woman risking everything for a stranger. "Why?" he'd asked in broken English. Sarah had looked exhausted, scared but resolute. "Because you're someone's son, maybe someone's brother, and you don't deserve to die alone in a ravine just for being who you are." She'd never told anyone. When Richard discovered her petticoat torn and bloody, she'd lied and said she'd fallen. Took his anger about her clumsiness, never mentioned the Apache warrior she'd saved. Kuruk never forgot. He carried that kindness with him like a talisman. When he became a warrior, then a respected scout who moved between white and Apache worlds, he remembered the woman who'd seen his humanity when she could have turned away. 2 months ago, Kuruk had been trading in Santa Fe when he overheard a conversation. Cattlemen laughing about Richard Cartwright's brutality, how he'd thrown out his pregnant wife like garbage, how the whole town had turned on her. One man mentioned her name, Sarah. Kuruk's blood had gone cold. He'd asked careful questions, confirmed it was the same woman. Then he traveled to Richard's town, moved through it like a ghost and watched Sarah scrubbing floors, begging for work, sleeping in stables, growing thinner and more desperate as her pregnancy advanced. He watched Richard and his new young wife parade through town, watched Sarah's own parents close their door to her, watched the entire community participate in her destruction, and he felt rage, cold, calculated rage. This woman had saved his life when he was nothing to her. She'd risked everything for a stranger, and her community had repaid her compassion by destroying her when she needed them most. The Apache had a concept. Debts must be balanced. She'd saved his life. Now, he would save hers. But he wouldn't stop there. Everyone who'd participated in her destruction would face consequences. Not violence, Kuruk was smarter than that, but consequences nonetheless. First, though, he needed to get Sarah to safety. She was 8 months pregnant now, clearly malnourished, and winter was coming. If he waited much longer, she and the baby would die. He just needed the right moment. Kuruk had done well for himself in the years since Sarah saved him. He'd become a respected scout, trusted by both Apache and white traders. He'd learned English fluently, built relationships that allowed him to move between worlds. He had resources, knowledge, connections, and now he would use every bit of it for her. It took him 2 months of careful preparation. He couldn't just approach her. A lone Apache man approaching a pregnant white woman would get him killed and her blamed. He needed to be strategic. So he watched, learned her patterns, the routes she walked, where she worked, when she was most vulnerable and most desperate. He also began gathering information about Richard Cartwright, talking to traders, listening to gossip, learning about Richard's business dealings, his family's influence, the dirty secrets every powerful family has. Kuruk was patient, thorough. He didn't just want to save Sarah, he wanted to destroy the people who'd destroyed her. But that would come later. First, rescue. The moment came on a cold October night. Sarah was sleeping in the stable when she heard sounds outside. Voices, footsteps. She froze, terror flooding through her. Sometimes drunk men came looking for her, thinking a desperate pregnant woman would have no choice but to submit. She grabbed a piece of wood, her only weapon, tried to make herself smaller in the hay. Her baby kicked frantically, as if sensing danger. The stable door opened, lantern light flooded in. Sarah raised her makeshift weapon with shaking hands. "Sarah Mitchell," a voice said in careful English, "I am not here to hurt you. I am here because you once saved my life." Sarah blinked against the light, saw a tall Apache man, maybe in his mid-20s, standing in the doorway. Something about his eyes seemed familiar. "6 years ago," the man continued, "you found me bleeding in a ravine. You bandaged my wounds, gave me your water, saved my life when you could have left me to die. Do you remember?" Slowly, through the fog of exhaustion and fear, Sarah did remember. The young Apache warrior, the gunshot wound, the blood. "That was you." "My name is Kuruk," he said, "and I have come to repay my debt. You are dying here. You and your baby both. I can offer you safety, food, shelter, care during your birth, everything you need." Sarah stared at him, unable to process this. "Why would you do that?" "Because you saved me when no one else would have. Because what is being done to you is evil, and I will not stand by and watch." Kuruk's voice was firm, certain. "I have prepared a camp, safe, warm, hidden, with a midwife who can help when the baby comes. You can stay there as long as you need." It sounded too good to be true. Sarah's first instinct was distrust. 6 months of cruelty had taught her that. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing," Kuruk said simply. "Only to balance the debt. You gave me life. I give you life. That is how it should be." Sarah looked down at her swollen belly, at her stick-thin arms, felt the cold seeping into her bones. She was 8 months pregnant, homeless, and running out of time. This man could be lying, could be dangerous, could be leading her into something worse, but she was already dying. At least this way she had a chance. "Okay," Sarah whispered. "Okay." Kuruk nodded once. "Gather your things. We leave now while the town sleeps. No one will know where you've gone." Sarah had almost nothing to gather. One change of clothes, her mother's Bible. She stood gasping at the pain in her back and legs. and followed Kuruk into the night. They walked for 2 hours, Kuruk moving slowly to accommodate Sarah's exhausted, pregnant body. He'd brought a horse, but Sarah was too weak to ride alone, so he helped her onto it and walked alongside, steadying her. Every time she started to fall asleep, he'd gently wake her. Not yet, soon. Stay awake just a little longer. Finally, they reached a cottonwood grove near a stream, hidden from the main trails. And there, a camp. Not a teepee, but a small, solid shelter built from wood and canvas. Inside, blankets, a fire pit, supplies. More comfort than Sarah had seen in 6 months. "This is for you," Kuruk said. "For as long as you need it. I will bring food, water, firewood. An Apache midwife named Desba will come next week to check on you and prepare for the birth. You are safe now." Sarah stood in the entrance, overwhelmed. "I don't understand. Why go to all this trouble for me?" Kuruk met her eyes steadily. "You showed me mercy when the world showed me only violence. You saw me as human when everyone else saw me as prey. That is not a debt easily repaid, but I will try, and more than that." He hesitated. "What is being done to you is wrong. Everyone in that town knows it is wrong. But they do it anyway because it is easier than standing up to power. I will not be like them. I will do what is right, even if it is difficult." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. For the first time in 6 months, they were tears of relief instead of despair. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." Kuruk nodded. "Rest now. You are safe. Your baby is safe. And tomorrow, we begin rebuilding your life." The first week was like waking from a nightmare. Sarah slept for nearly 2 days straight, her body finally releasing the tension it had held for 6 months. When she woke, there was food, real food. Venison, cornbread, vegetables. Kuruk brought it daily, never intruding, just leaving it and checking that she was all right. Desba, the Apache midwife, came on the 5th day. She was ancient, her face a map of wrinkles, her hands sure and strong. She examined Sarah with gentle efficiency, speaking in Apache while Kuruk translated. "She says you are malnourished, but the baby is strong," Kuruk told her. "Fighter spirit, like the mother. She says with proper food and rest, you both will survive. The baby comes soon, maybe 3 weeks." Sarah touched her belly, feeling overwhelming relief. "The baby is okay?" Desba spoke again, and Kuruk smiled slightly. "She says your baby is stubborn, refuses to give up, exactly like you." Over the following days, Sarah began to heal, not just physically, but something deeper. The constant fear started to ease. Her body, finally fed and rested, began to regain strength. The baby's kicks became more playful than frantic. And Kuruk was there. Not constantly, but consistently, bringing supplies, fixing things in the camp, sometimes sitting by the fire in the evening, teaching her Apache words, telling her stories about his people. He treated her with respect. Not pity, not desire, just genuine human respect. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, Sarah finally asked the question that had been nagging at her. "You said you wanted to repay the debt, but you're doing so much more than that. Why?" Kuruk was quiet for a long moment. "When you saved me, I was young, angry. I saw all white people as the enemy. You could have been just one more person to hate. But you chose kindness over fear, compassion over safety. You taught me something important, that people are individuals, that some are good and some are bad, regardless of what they look like." He turned to look at her. "I returned to find you because of the debt, but I stay because you deserve better than what they did to you, because I have seen your strength, because—" He stopped, seemed to reconsider his words. "Because I admire who you are, not who you were before, who you are now, still fighting, still surviving, still choosing to live." Sarah felt something shift in her chest, something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope, not just for survival, but for something more, something better. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing me, really seeing me." Kuruk nodded, and in his eyes, Sarah saw something that made her breath catch. Not pity or duty, but genuine respect. Perhaps even the beginning of something deeper. The days settled into a rhythm. Sarah grew stronger. The baby dropped lower, preparing for birth. Desba visited twice more, approving of Sarah's progress. Kuruk continued to provide everything needed, and gradually Sarah began to feel almost human again. But she also knew this couldn't last forever. Eventually she'd have to face the world beyond this protected grove. She'd have to figure out how to survive with a baby, how to build a life from nothing. One evening, 3 weeks after her rescue, Sarah broached the subject. What happens after? After the baby comes? I can't hide here forever. Kuruk had been stirring the fire. He looked up, his dark eyes reflecting the flames. What do you want to happen? I don't know, Sarah admitted. I can't go back to that town. I have no money, no skills except being a wife, which clearly didn't work out. I have a baby coming and no way to support it. Her voice broke. I'm terrified. You have skills, Kuruk said firmly. You are educated. You read and write. You know herbs and medicine. You are clever and resourceful, and you are stronger than you know. You survived 6 months that would have killed most people. You will survive this too. But how? We will figure it out together, Kuruk said. After the baby comes and you are recovered, we will make a plan. Maybe we go to a different town where no one knows you. Maybe we go somewhere between white and Apache worlds where you can start fresh. Maybe, he paused. Maybe you stay with me. Sarah's heart skipped. With you? Kuruk met her eyes. I'm not saying this because you are vulnerable or because I expect anything. I'm saying this because over these weeks I have come to care for you, not out of debt, but because of who you are. If you want to build a new life, I would be honored to help you build it. As a friend, as a partner, as whatever you want me to be. Sarah stared at him, overwhelmed. 6 months ago, she'd had a husband who'd thrown her away like trash. Now she had a man who'd saved her life, asking for nothing, offering everything. It was too much, too fast. And yet, I need time, she said softly, to have this baby, to heal, to figure out who I am now. But I would like you to stay, to be part of whatever comes next, if that's okay. Kuruk smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. That is more than okay. That is everything. Sarah's baby came early, a month sooner than expected, which terrified her. But Kuruk had prepared. He'd brought an Apache midwife, an elder named Desba who delivered hundreds of babies. When Sarah's water broke in the middle of the night, Kuruk didn't panic. He simply held her hand and let Desba work. The labor was long, painful. Sarah screamed until her voice was raw. But Desba was skilled and patient, and Kuruk never left her side, held her hand, whispered encouragement in Apache and English, made her feel safe even in the midst of agony. When the baby finally came, a girl, small but healthy with a powerful cry, Sarah wept with relief. Kuruk cut the cord as Desba instructed, and when the midwife placed the baby in Sarah's arms, Sarah looked at this tiny, perfect life and felt overwhelming love. What will you name her? Kuruk asked softly. Sarah looked at him. This man who'd saved her when she'd saved him years ago. This man who saw her completely and loved her anyway. Hope, she said. Her name is Hope. Because that's what you gave me when I had none. Kuruk's eyes shone with tears. He leaned down, kissed Sarah's forehead, then gently touched Hope's tiny hand. She is beautiful, like her mother. The next 2 weeks were sacred. Sarah recovered, her body healing. Hope grew stronger every day. Kuruk provided everything they needed. And in that cottonwood grove, away from the town that had destroyed her, Sarah found peace. But the outside world still existed, and it was changing. While Sarah had been healing in the hidden grove, Kuruk had been working. The revenge he'd promised himself wasn't violent. Violence would only confirm white people's prejudices about Apache and put Sarah in more danger. No, Kuruk's revenge was more sophisticated, more devastating. He'd spent weeks gathering information, Richard Cartwright's business dealings, the family's political connections, their financial arrangements. And slowly, carefully, Kuruk had begun to spread truths that powerful people wanted hidden. He'd talked to traders who'd been cheated by the Cartwrights, miners who'd been forced off land through intimidation, families who'd been ruined by the Cartwright monopoly, and he'd connected them with journalists, with territorial officials, with people who had the power to investigate. He'd also spread stories about Sarah. Not lies, just truth. The truth of how she'd been discarded while pregnant, how the entire town had participated in her persecution, how a woman who'd done nothing wrong had been driven to homelessness by people who claimed to be civilized Christians. The stories had spread like wildfire because they were scandalous, because they were true, and because they revealed the hypocrisy at the heart of respectable society. The stories Kuruk had seeded had grown into a wildfire. By the time Hope was 2 weeks old, Richard Cartwright's trading contracts had been suspended pending investigation. His family's reputation was in tatters. The town that had once worshipped them now whispered about their cruelty. The territorial governor himself visited the town, appalled by what he'd heard. Richard was called to account. His new wife, Rebecca, young and not nearly as invested in cruelty, broke under questioning and admitted the truth. That Richard had deliberately destroyed Sarah to make room for her. That his family had threatened anyone who helped. That they'd treated a pregnant woman like garbage. The governor stripped Richard of his contracts, fined his family heavily, made it clear that such behavior would not be tolerated in his territory. It wasn't prison, but it was ruin. The Cartwrights fell from power as quickly as they'd thrown Sarah aside. When Sarah heard the news, she felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph, just exhaustion. "It doesn't give me back the 6 months I suffered," she told Kuruk quietly. "It doesn't erase the cruelty." "No," Kuruk agreed, "but it ensures no one else will suffer the same way. And it proves you were never the problem. They were." Sarah looked at Hope sleeping peacefully in her arms. "What do I do now? The town knows what happened. Some people might welcome me back, but—" "Do you want to go back?" Kuruk asked. Sarah thought about the town, the people who'd watched her suffer, her parents who'd closed their door, the life she'd lost, and realized, no, I don't want to go back. That life, the one where I tried to be perfect for people who would discard me anyway, I do not want it. Then what do you want? Kuruk's eyes were patient, loving. I want... Sarah looked at him, at Hope, at the simple camp that had become more of a home than the mansion ever was. I want to build something new, with you, if you meant what you said, about us, about Hope being ours. Kuruk's answer was to gather her and Hope gently into his arms. I meant every word. You are mine. Hope is ours. And we will build a life together. Not in the white world that destroyed you. Not fully in the Apache world. But in our own world. Between. Together. They left the territory a month later, headed west, where new settlements were forming. Places where people cared less about the past and more about the future. Kuruk used his connections with traders to establish a new business, buying and selling between Apache, Mexican, and white communities. Sarah used her education to teach children of all backgrounds. They built a home, not grand but theirs, filled with love and laughter. Hope grew strong and healthy, calling Kuruk Papa from her first words. Other children came, 2 boys who had Kuruk's dark eyes and Sarah's determination. Sarah never forgot the 6 months she'd spent broken, but she also never let it define her. She'd survived the worst humans could do to each other, and in surviving she'd discovered strength she didn't know she had. She'd found love that was real, not based on beauty or convenience, but on seeing someone's soul and choosing to honor it. Sometimes she'd see pregnant women struggling and would quietly help, leave food, offer work, give what she'd needed and never received, paying forward the kindness that had saved her. And sometimes on quiet evenings, Kuruk would find Sarah staring at the sunset with tears on her face. He'd hold her, understanding without words. Those tears were for the woman she'd been, the girl who'd believed being perfect would keep her safe. She'd learned the hard truth. Perfection was impossible and safety was an illusion. But she'd also learned this. You could lose everything, home, family, dignity, hope, and still rebuild. You could be destroyed and still rise. You could be abandoned and still find love. the scars remained. But they were proof of survival, not defeat. Sarah stood at the doorway of her home, watching Hope toddle after butterflies while her baby son slept against her chest. Kuruk was returning from a trading run, his horse appearing on the horizon. When he saw them, his face lit with a smile that made Sarah's heart skip. This life, so different from what she'd imagined at 23, was more real than anything she'd had before. Harder in some ways. She worked with her hands now, lived simply, existed between worlds without fully belonging to any. But she had love, real love, the kind that didn't abandon when things got difficult, the kind that saw her at her worst and chose to stay, the kind that made her stronger rather than demanding she be perfect. As Kuruk dismounted and swept Hope into his arms, making her giggle, Sarah felt profound gratitude, not just for being saved, but for being seen, for being chosen, for being loved, not despite her scars but including them. She'd been abandoned pregnant and left to die, but she'd fought, survived, and in the ruins of her old life, she'd built something better, a family that was truly hers, a love that was truly real, a life that was truly lived. The town that destroyed her had learned its lesson. The man who threw her away had lost everything, but Sarah didn't care about revenge anymore, because the best revenge wasn't making them suffer. It was thriving without them, building a life so full of love and purpose that their cruelty became irrelevant. She'd cried so many tears in those 6 months. Everyone had felt like dying, but Kuruk had been right. Those tears were repaid, not in violence or vengeance, but in justice, in love, in a future she'd built from ashes. As her family came together, Kuruk, with Hope in his arms, baby James sleeping against her chest, Sarah understood the final truth. She hadn't just survived. She'd won, not by destroying her enemies, but by refusing to let them destroy her, by choosing love over bitterness, by building instead of breaking, and that, she realized, was the most powerful revenge of all. She was abandoned pregnant and fought to survive, and when the Apache returned, he made everyone pay, not with violence, but with truth, with consequences, and with love so powerful it rebuilt what cruelty had destroyed. If this story touched your heart, drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and share it with someone who needs to remember, your worst moment doesn't define you, your choice to rise does. We have a date with our next adventure.